So if you have been sort of following the IT space lately, one thing that you will definitely be familiar with, maybe even if you don't, you might still be familiar with this, and that is the emergence of the cloud. Everything nowadays is migrating to the cloud. Now, basically, what is the cloud? I guess I'll start by kind of explaining that to you. The best way to really describe the cloud is you're kind of outsourcing where your data is held to a third party. We'll leave it at that kind of. So servers that are owned by maybe Google or Amazon or Microsoft, depending on which implementation you go with, right? A very common one would be like Amazon Web Services, obviously, the S3 buckets and stuff. You got DigitalOcean, Microsoft Azure, all of that, if you want to get real nitty-gritty and start naming them. But pretty much, you can even have your own private cloud, right? Like some companies, I won't name names, but some companies have their own private implementations of the cloud where they actually have like a server room where they have a bunch of servers, and they allow their developers within the company to spin them up as needed, just like you would with one of these third-party cloud providers. Now, I guess the big question then for all the security guys out there, or people that are interested in the security side of things, is the cloud secure, right? A lot of people would ask that question. Now, I guess I'll say it can be, and it can also not be. It really depends on how you're using the cloud, right? So you probably, if you follow the security space for any time, you probably have heard a lot about cloud-based vulnerabilities, or vulnerabilities within like Amazon buckets and stuff. A lot of buckets got leaked, and a lot of companies really gave away a lot of their data they didn't want other people to see. They sort of had it out there publicly available. Now that is the biggest vulnerability, I guess you could say, with the cloud. But it's not really with the cloud. It's how the developers... Sorry, my recording keeps going here. It's giving me notifications on a low battery, but hopefully it didn't cut out there. But really, it's not a vulnerability of the cloud per se. It's not an Amazon or Google vulnerability. It's simply a misconfiguration. So that, with misconfigurations, the issue lies with the developers and the people that are managing the IT infrastructure. So, for example, whenever you use these cloud implementations, you'll have a lot of settings that you can configure, right? And by default, they actually make these things secure, but maybe whether it's due to ease of use or some kind of development, something within the development, they change the flags, they change the configurations to make it more convenient, I guess. And then when they throw them live, once they have them live, they forget to switch the settings back to the secure settings. So, for example, I know this is might be a little bit hard to follow, but basically they're choosing the wrong settings, and that can make it vulnerable, whereas by default it was secure. Now, I guess to make this a little bit more concrete, so you maybe understand a little better, would be a lot of the vulnerabilities that have emerged recently with the cloud has to do with buckets that are just publicly viewable, that shouldn't be viewable to the public, right? So something like this could be a setting, just as simple as a setting within the, say, AWS, right? They might have made their bucket viewable to anyone. You don't have to be authorized. You don't have to put in your credentials to verify, that you're an account that should have access to it. They just make it viewable by everyone. Everyone has access. So that's as simple as like checking a box in the settings, right? That's a vulnerability, right? So, a lot of people think of hacking as like something that's super, technical and in the weeds and doing crazy kind of, terminals on the screen with like crazy binary. But oftentimes that's really not the case. It's really simple things that can actually be pretty big vulnerabilities. You think of a company that holds like financial data, for example. Oh no, you know what? I'll give you a real world example. You think of a company that owns smart home devices, and those, smart home devices, I'm talking like, like your Amazon Alexas and stuff like that. There was actually a company, it wasn't Amazon, it was some other, I don't even remember what company it was, but they had smart home devices. I think it was some Chinese company. They had smart home devices where you could basically just have it control different things in your house, like maybe your temperature in your home and different stuff like that. They were collecting all this data on people, right? All this information on them, all the audio data and stuff like that they were collecting, and then they were actually storing it in a publicly viewable Amazon like S3 bucket. So that's where it doesn't sound like much just because it's not some crazy hack that an attacker had to do. All they had to do was browse to a URL and view the bucket and get all this data, right? But still, really sensitive data. This is information on people's homes and stuff like that. So as you see, it's not necessarily always the flashy ones that are the big vulnerabilities here. But as for the cloud itself, it is secure if you configure it the right way. I mean, even if you don't know much about cloud security, if you just use the default settings, pretty much 9 times out of 10, or maybe even 10 times out of 10 nowadays, you're good to go. But yeah, that was pretty much what I had on this topic here. Just let me know if you have any questions down in the comment section below. I'll see you in the next one.